Thank you, and we are live.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should mute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice for public comment guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you, Caitlin. And looks like our chair has arrived.
Yes, I actually had a little trouble signing on for some reason, but I'm very happy to be here. Do you want me to go ahead and take over?
Yes, you may take over.
Okay, so we just, did we just have roll call or?
No,
we just
that
listened
was
to
next.
Video.
Okay, so I'd like to ask Caitlin to call the roll, please.
I'd be happy to, Chair Abelson, and nice to see you as well.
You too.
Okay, so as you all know, this is my first meeting with PCC, so bear with me if I have any momentary pauses. I have luckily Clerk of the Board Terry Ann on as well for technical trouble, so thank you, Terry Ann. So I'll go ahead and take roll. Member Anderson. Member Clark.
Here.
Thank you. Member Cooney.
Here.
Thank you. Member Dodgelli.
Present.
Thank you. Member Bruns.
Here.
Thank you. Member Abrara.
Present.
Am I saying your name correctly, Member Abrara?
Close. Ibarra.
Ibarra, thank you.
Mhm.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Next, Member Kamara.
Here.
Thank you. Member Nestor Brush. Okay. Member Perry.
Here.
Thank you. Member Reese Brown. Okay. Member Timothy. Okay. Member Toth. And I did see Member Noya.
Here.
Thank you very much. And I did not see Member Garcia.
I'm here.
Thank you so much, Member Garcia. I appreciate it. And then Member Ridgway.
Here.
Thank you so much. And is Member Soblowski here? Okay, good. And it looks like now we are on to Vice Chair Smith.
Here.
Thank you. And finally, Chair Abelson.
Here. Thank you all for being here, and it's good to see you again. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask our Vice Chair, Ella Smith, to lead us in that.
Shall we pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of
of America.
and to the republic
Help me,
to the republic
for which it
which
stands,
stands
one
one
nation,
nation
under God, indivisible,
under
and with liberty.
and justice for all.
I don't say that part.
Oh, you, okay. Okay, that would be your choice. Okay. Let's see. The next item on the agenda is public comment, which is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items of interest that are not on the agenda. Do we have any requests to speak?
We do not have any public comments at this time, Chair Abelson. Oh, and
Okay.
it looks like Peter has his hand raised.
Peter,
I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce you to and welcome Caitlin Stone. Caitlin came to CCTA from East Bay Regional Parks District. She's been with us 2 weeks now, maybe 3, 2 weeks. You all remember Fifi. She left the authority about 6 months ago after our last PCC meeting. Don't worry, it wasn't your fault. We've now got Caitlin on board to take her position, and she's been a great asset to the authority so far. And clearly by her command of the roll call and the meeting so far, she's doing a great job, and just wanted to welcome her on board.
Well,
Welcome.
thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Very kind.
Listen, I think we all welcome you, Caitlin, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
With that, we will move on to yes. Okay. We move on to the consent calendar is the next item, I believe. And that would be for the actions from July the 19th, 2021. Are there any changes, comments from the committee? And does anyone want to pull an item? I'm not hearing anything. Have we received any written comments, Caitlin?
No, we have not.
Okay, I think we're ready for a motion. Somebody like to make a motion?
Member Dowjelly makes the motion to accept the consent calendar.
Thank you. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. With that, did you get the names, Caitlin?
I believe I did, but just for the sake of the record, I had Dodgelli is moving and seconded by Vice Chair Smith.
Yes.
Yes.
And very good at name recognizing our voices, I think. Or the little message that tells you in the corner. Anyway, you're doing quite well. So at this point, if there are no further comments, I think not. Okay. I'll ask Caitlin to please conduct a roll call.
I'd be happy to.
Well, okay.
So we will go down the list.
Well, I thought we had the roll call already. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have said it that way. A roll call vote.
Ah, okay.
I'm just reading from a script. I think.
That is correct. Right now, we're just voting on the consent calendar, which is the summary of actions. So Chair Abelson, you're right on track, and I'd be happy to take the vote for the consent calendar if we are ready for that.
Okay, I think we need to have roll call though to do that.
Mhm.
So do you want to do that now?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with Member Clark.
Yay.
Thank you. Member Cooney.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Dodgelli.
Yes.
Okay. Member Bruns.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Ibarra. Thank you. Member Kamara, I'm sorry, is it Kamara or Kamara?
Kamara.
Kamara, thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Member Perry,
Isn't that
Yes.
something that you guys?
thank you. Member Garcia,
I will pass since member Clark voted already.
thank you very much. So next we have member Ridgway.
I'm abstaining.
Okay. And then finally, Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
thank you. And Chair Abelson,
Yes.
thank you all.
Okay, so I believe the motion passes. And there were, however, there were some abstentions. Was it 2?
One abstain, member Ridgway.
Thought there was another one. Maybe not. Okay. So the motion does pass. And so now we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the regular agenda items. And the first item is going to be presented by Peter Engel to provide an update on the history of Measure C and Measure J fund distribution. Peter?
Thank you, Chair Abelson. I'm trying to, I need to start this over. Trying to share my screen here. Give me just 1 minute. Where are you? There you are. Okay. Okay, there I've got it. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, at our last meeting in July, there was a lot of questions about funding and kind of how the funding flowed to the different operators around the county. And so we do have a lot of new members and a lot of new folks in the county involved with paratransit operations. So the timing's perfect to kind of get everybody an update on how in general, how the funds flow, and very specifically how funds that come through CCTA through our sales tax measure have flown both through Measure C, which was voted on in 1988, and then Measure J, which is an extension of Measure C, which was voted on in 2004, but went into effect in 2009, fiscal year 2009, after Measure C sunsetted. So I just wanted to start with showing you kind of the various fund sources for senior transportation services. You can see there Measure C and J. That's our local transportation sales tax for Contra Costa County. The Transportation Development Act, specifically Articles 4 and 4.5. Those are funds that are collected by the state of California on sales tax, quarter-cent sales tax. I think TDA went into effect in 77 or 78. So it's been around for quite a while. And then those funds they're generated at state level through sales tax, but they're managed specifically by MTC, and then go to the various operators. And many years ago, they actually went to those funds went to the jurisdictions, and they could use them for local streets and roads as long as there was no unmet transit needs. So the transit operators had to go through a process to show that there was unmet needs in order to be able to claim those funds. Of course, local fares that are generated as people ride the bus General funds support from the different jurisdictions. Some general funds are used to support local service. And then there are several federal programs, the ones that are specific to the stuff that we work with quite a bit are Section 5310, which is for specialized services kind of above and beyond what the ADA requires. Job access reverse commute actually doesn't exist anymore. I missed that. I should have taken it off the slide. And New Freedom's the same way. Job access reverse commute and New Freedom were rolled into the existing formula funds, which is Section 5307, which the bus operators get. And they use that for both capital projects. They can only use it. They cannot use it for fixed route bus operations. They can only use it for capital, but they can use a percentage of that to support their paratransit service. So they all do that. So a little history, I had mentioned this in 1988. The voters of Contra Costa County approved Measure C. What they do is they approve a transportation expenditure plan that's put together, and then the expenditure plan is actually part of the ballot, so they know exactly what they're voting for. In that measure, there was a program section called Elderly and Handicapped Transit Service. It received what was calculated to be 2.97% of the annual sales tax revenue that came in. So, you know, if $10 million came in for the year, then 2.97% of that would go to support this elderly and handicapped transit service. So that was undefined other than the amount of money that was going into it. Because it was undefined, CCTA, which was actually formed in 1988 in order to support Measure C. So the voters, when they voted for Measure C, they also voted to start CCTA, which was the agency that was going to oversee that. CCTA did a procurement to have the Contra Costa Paratransit plan done. That plan was completed in 1990. Between 1988 and 1990, those funds went into a reserve that was then allocated out through the period of Measure C, along with the annual allocation. So the specific purpose of the Contra Costa Transportation Plan, for the most part, was to figure out how to allocate two fund sources amongst all the operators in the city. The TDA 4.5, which I had mentioned earlier, and the Measure C funds. So I will come back to the slide and get to that third bullet point. While this was going on with the study, there was the Americans with Disability Act that came in and was made into law. And the implementation of the ADA occurred specifically with transit over the next 2 or 3 years. So there was kind of a roll-up period where operators had a chance to begin compliance with the ADA. So what happened and so you'll see on this next slide, this was the Contra Costa Paratransit Plan that was adopted in 1990, and it established allocation procedures for Measure C and the TDA 4.5, like I just mentioned. Post ADA, the TDA 4.5 was taken out of this particular allocation and given directly to the transit operators to meet their ADA obligations. So ADA was an unfunded mandate. It was required that operators were required to comply, but they weren't given any money to do it. So MTC chose area-wide to use the TDA funds to help operators comply with that unfunded mandate. For the most part, what this meant was that there was 4 jurisdictions that were getting funds to operate paratransit. They were no longer going to get the TDA funds. That was Richmond, El Cerrito, San Pablo, and Antioch. And Antioch used its TDA funding to support the senior center bus service, which at some point switched over to Tri-Delta Transit under a contract with the city. So Tri-Delta Transit was doing it anyway. And then so for a period of Measure C, there was 2 allocations to East County, one to Antioch, one to Tri-Delta Transit. and everybody agreed Tri-Delta Transit's doing the work anyway. Let's just make it easy, and the Measure C funds all went to Tri-Delta Transit at that point. So here's how the allocation in the study, you can see I pulled this information right out of the study. This was done in 1990, back in the days, probably before Word documents and all those things. I think they actually typed these reports, and I'm happy to send you a copy if you want to read something from 88 through 90. But they basically broke. They basically used 3 categories of demographics, and then they weighted those categories. And so 60% weight went to the demographic of transportation disabled of all ages. 30% went to, or 30% weighted to the percentage of households below $12,500 annual income. This was the federal poverty rate at the time. And then 10% was weighted to seniors 65 and over that have no transportation disability. So in other words, seniors that don't have a disability. And so that's the weighting. And then that weighting was applied to the demographics numbers at the time. And you can see in this table below is how those percents were all established on how the money was distributed to the individual communities and the subregions. And in this case, excuse me, you can see all the operators there. And then East County is Tri-Delta Transit. So this is the formula that was used under Measure C to allocate that 2.97% of funding that went into the program out to the different operators. So does everybody understand that?
So
I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
I have a question, Peter.
Okay.
Anna. Yeah. So in the I believe the West County cities of El Cerrito, Richmond, and
San Pablo.
San Pablo at minimum, I can't remember if there are more cities. Did the cities programs get the money?
Yeah. So
Okay.
so the city programs existed prior to Measure C. So those city programs were the ones that got the Measure C money. Now, in the case of Richmond, the Richmond service area actually includes some of so San Pablo and El Cerrito are their city limit populations. Richmond gets a percentage of funding based on some of the unincorporated county areas that surround Richmond, as well as Westcat, which is the WCCTA, that's Westcat. So Richmond and Westcat got together and they split some of the unincorporated areas, and then they receive a certain percentage of funding based on the population of those unincorporated areas. That's kind of what brought up this whole discussion last July about the populations of the unincorporated area and who's serving those and who should be serving them. So that's how this population allocation came into effect way back in 1990.
Peter?
Yes.
This is Dale.
Yeah, hi Dale.
What is the criteria for, could you go back to this? What is the criteria that determines whether someone is transportation disabled?
It's actually, I don't know what the criteria is. That's a good question, but it's actually a segment in the census American survey data. They make that determination. So I think my guess is it's a self-determination. When you fill out the survey or the census, you actually have a choice to mark whether you're transportation disabled or a senior without a transportation disability.
Okay, thank you very much.
So this slide I already showed you, but I wanted to point out that third bullet at the end of Measure C, which was fiscal year 2008, 2009, almost $34 million had been spent to the transportation service providers in the county that were eligible to receive Measure C funds. So that would be the three public transit operators, Tri-Delta County Connection and WestCat, and the three cities in West County, Richmond, San Pablo, and El Cerrito. Now you might say to yourself, well, why didn't East Bay Paratransit get me? Well, remember, East Bay Paratransit didn't even exist when Measure C passed, because it came about after ADA, and it was actually created as a partnership between BART and AC Transit to meet and be in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act to provide complimentary paratransit service to those two fixed route operators. So at the time of Measure C, it didn't identify East Bay Paratransit Consortium because it didn't exist. So it was never made eligible to receive Measure C funds. That changed when Measure J was passed. It was included to be able to receive those funds. So fast forward to 2000. So back on Measure C, so every year the authority did an allocation based on all those percentages. We took a spreadsheet to the board that showed, okay, the 2.97% gets split up by these percentages, and it goes to, that's how much money would go to each of the operators, passed by resolution, and then that's what we sent. Fast forward to Measure J, which made things a lot more complex. And that's because it recognized that the programs that started or were funded under Measure C still needed funding to exist. So what Measure J did was it guaranteed, it held harmless the current operators and the amount of money that they got. In other words, all those operators that receive money under Measure C would continue to receive that same percentage under Measure J. But what it did was it increased the Measure J program from 2.97%, the Measure C program from 2.97% to 3.5% in the first year. And then that amount increases 0.1% every year until the end of Measure J, which is 2034. So Measure J is a 25-year measure. Measure C was a 20-year measure. And it starts out with an allocation of 3.5. And this table here just showed, this is the cover of the expenditure plan. This table here just shows you kind of the programs. I'll give you a more detailed version of this right here. So the two programs that we're really concerned with the PCC is the countywide transportation for seniors and people with disabilities. That's what program 15 is when you hear us refer to program 15. And this is the money that we recommend allocation to the CCTA board every year. And then this additional transportation for seniors and disabilities, program 20. And this is only relevant in two of the 4 subregions. And it's because those 2 subregions felt that it was important to have additional money go to this program. And so they actually use some of their discretionary power. And some of the funds are kind of discretionary when the transportation sales tax was put together, and the subregions kind of say, well, we want to put more money in this program and maybe less in this other one. So that's what happened in this case, where Central and West County actually put more money into their subregional, into their transportation for seniors and people with disabilities. West County at 0.65% per year and Central County at 0.5% per year. West County allocates that funding out through WICTAC. They do a recommended allocation every year to the operators for that money, and that's done through WICTAC. And then TransPAC in Central County actually does a grant program where they primarily fund individual projects, and most of those are nonprofit run transportation projects like Choice in Aging and Mobility Matters, and Rossmore. They all receive funds out of this particular pot of money for their annual operations and capital programs. Some of the cities get this money. For instance, the city of Pleasant Hill needed to replace their senior bus. They operate a senior bus program through a city program, and they needed to replace that bus. So they asked TransPac for some money to do that. So these are really the two Measure J programs that the PCC, and primarily the PCC, has interest from a funding perspective in Program 15. Program 20 are allocated through their subregions. So Program 15, in aggregate, it's 5%. I said it starts at 3% or 3.5%, and it really goes up to 4.7. It goes up to 5.7. I think it goes up to 5.7%. So it aggregates at 5%. So basically, we increased funding from Measure C to Measure G, from Measure C to Measure J, from 2.97% to 5%, which is not enough. There it is, right there, 5.9%. It's not enough, but it certainly is better than the 2.97%. And the expenditure plan actually breaks down this annual growth percentage by subregion. So it's a 0.1%. Let me point with my cursor. I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is countywide, 0.1%, but the shares are broken down. And this is an example of West County. They're broken down by, a certain percentage of that. And that's all in the expenditure plan, and we can't deviate off that. So what the expenditure plan says, that's what the voters voted for. That's what we have to use when we allocate these funds. And also AC Transit BART, which is the East Bay Paratransit Consortium, became eligible recipient under Measure J. Does that make sense? It's kind of a difficult thing, but just trying to make sure that and this is just a different graphic depiction of that there's the total sales tax revenue that's multiplied by each of the percent that the subregions get. Some of that's guaranteed funds, and some of it is guaranteed under Measure C, and then there's growth that occurs, and then there's the two subregional funds, and the next slide kind of graphically shows this. So the blue line at the bottom, or the blue bars, are the Measure C guarantee. And the reason that those go up, the percentage stays the same. The reason they go up is because the sales tax revenue goes up every year because of inflation or new, additional sales, things like that. That sales tax every year is growing. And so even though the percentage is the same, that blue bar is going to grow. The red bar is the kind of the new funds under Measure C, and they go up or under Measure J. I keep saying the wrong thing. They go up at a faster rate because not only is it the growth, but it's also that 0.1% that gets added every year. So I think this year, like I said, it started at 3.5. I think this year the allocation was 4.6%. So there's been some significant growth. And then the green is kind of the actual revenues. This coming fiscal year, the fiscal year we're in right now, is fiscal year 22. I think we're going to see this actual number up higher. This was a conservative projection because of COVID and kind of what's going on there. So I think when we see these revenues actual, they're going to be up closer to what fiscal year 21 was. So does that make sense to everybody? So and this is the last slide, and there'll be a chance for you to ask questions, but really, the only place this really comes to play is in West County, because there's multiple operators in West County. The other three subregions, there's only one operator. There's County Connection in both Central County and Southwest County, and there's Tri-Delta Transit in East County. So they basically are able to get these funds and use them. In West County, these funds have to be split between the four operators. And that split is predetermined for the blue section, but it's not predetermined for the red section. So that kind of falls on WICTAC to make recommendations on how that red section in West County is split up. So that's where we're kind of getting this. What's the population now? How has that changed? Going back to that original formula, and kind of looking at what's going on in West County to make sure everybody's getting their fair share as operators and actually providing the service they're supposed to be providing in their service area. So I will stop there. That's the end of the presentation. I know it's complex, to say the least. But again, if there's the transportation expenditure plan is very prescriptive, to the point of in lots of cases the percentages are already written into the plan, and we then work with the subregions, WICTAC and Transpac and the operators to kind of the more discretionary funds. How are they going to be used? Where are they being used? And things like that. So, Janet, it looks like there's lots of questions.
Yeah, let me start out with just a brief, very brief comment about this that may help alleviate some of it. One of the nice things about having CCTA staff is that we on this committee don't have to calculate any of those numbers. And the important thing I would say for us is to understand that there are these different funding sources and requirements and distributions, and that CCTA each new period will tell the appropriate agencies as well as this committee how much it actually is. So how do I tell if somebody has a comment? Would I just ask?
You see the little hands raised on
Pardon?
their video windows. You should be able to see their hands, the little hand up, little icon. I think so. Jean and Joanna and Dale all have their hands raised.
Oh,
they're
if
on
I
video. Yeah.
I look at their picture.
Yep. See the little upper left-hand corner of the little hand?
Okay, so let's go ahead and with comments and start with Jean Clark from San Pablo.
Thanks, guys. And Peter, thanks for doing this. I know it's been a while, and I was one of the people that, asked for it. So I really appreciate it. And this is really going to help me kind of, explain this to our city as well. I think exactly what you had said, which was, I think now is a good time for us to look at what those actual divisions are now in our different cities, because those populations may have changed, right? The percentages of populations in each area has changed. And that is one of the ways that we decide funding. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, there's a bit of a nuance there, Gene, and that is that when Measure J was voted on, it only said that Measure C operators would get the same percentage. It said that Measure C recipients would get the same percentage that they get at the end of Measure C. It didn't say anything about the model would be updated every so many years based on population. It didn't do any of that. It just said the percentage. So I think we would have trouble saying we're gonna kind of recalculate the allocation percentages. I mean, now I say that for that blue part of that graph, the baseline. The red part, again, is certainly available to be adjusted based on any new population. Matter of fact, it's not even necessarily subject to that original allocation model. It's subject to CCTA and in this case, if in West County, WICTAC staff kind of figuring out a different model and how that can be distributed. and I know Joanna has a question, and she can, but Joanna's been doing this, I mean, back, I think we're on our third executive director at WICTAC that
Fourth.
has considered this, so.
Well, would we like to hear from Joanna right now?
Well, I think Jean can.
Yeah, so anyway, I think it would be, worth looking at that. The other thing that I had to say too was, and I know that this was like a question to come out of this, and I don't want to lose this thought with the whole group, is really reviewing everything that we serve to make sure that we are indeed serving all the areas that we think we're serving.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that was the other reason, I know for us, that with like San Pablo being in the middle of Richmond, Richmond knows what they're covering. We know what we're covering, but are we really covering all of it? Don't know. Do you know what I mean? And so that was just the other point that I wanted to make, that I think it's worth going through this reviewing exercises to make sure that every place that we're supposed to be serving, we're not thinking that some other agency is serving and we're missing that entire population.
Yeah,
That
you're
was just
right.
the other thing.
You're right, Gene. And there's some nuances in that too. It's like, because I think even you guys will pick up San Pablo residents, but you will take them outside of the city limits of San Pablo on their trips, and then
Absolutely.
return them. And so what your service area is versus who's eligible to ride your service could be two different things.
Right.
And that's the way it works in Richmond. And I'm not sure about El Cerrito right off the top of my head. I believe so, because you kind of almost need to be able to provide services outside.
We only for grocery and shopping trips do we take people outside.
Right.
And those are done when we try to fill up the van.
Yeah.
And take a whole van load at a time. We don't do it on a 1-by-1 request.
Right.
Well, and also, Janet, because that depends on where you are, right? So like, for instance, San Pablo doesn't have a Kaiser. So we have to take people outside of our area, because if they need medical,
we don't need
medical, they have to go outside the area. And so there's different nuances for every agency.
Right.
Yeah, we don't have a Kaiser either, but that's still the way we do it. So
that was the only two things that I just kind of wanted to put out there and have the council consider.
The person where'd you go? Joanna? There. Joanna, is your hand still up?
It is, unless
I don't see
I don't see it either. I don't know.
It disappeared,
maybe it timed out.
It was there. So it's your turn.
Thanks. Good to see everyone. Peter, thank you. That was actually enlightening for me. And I would ask that we can all get the PowerPoint, because I could use some of those slides when I try to explain to my board. And we are at WICTAC in a unique position because we have more money, but also we have more operators we fund. And Jean, to your point, I think there is change and, who's serving where. And COVID kind of slowed down our process. We used to meet every other month with the mobility management group and try to look at this. Right now, we have a pretty extensive list of questions that are sitting on Richmond's desk, trying to ask what is going on exactly with their program. But I don't think there's the political will at this point right now yet. There's some interest in how we allocate, but there hasn't been any real effort to change how we allocate. And even though trips out of the area, trips to medical appointments, trips to, all sorts of things, interjurisdictional are very real. Of course, like you point out, Kaiser is probably one of your #1 destinations, and it's not in San Pablo. I don't have answers. All I can say is, Peter, if you ever leave, I don't know how you're going to download this reality, because there's a lot of history here, and it's making sausage, right? I mean, it's the back room, and we all understand it's complicated. So I don't have answers. I just thought it was really good to hear exactly how complex it was.
I could add one thing to it. I primarily get around on Paratransit now. So if I need to go to Kaiser, I need to get there on Paratransit. But I just said that El Cerrito doesn't do it. But there is another agency that does do it. for our entire service area in West County outside of Westcat, and that's East Bay Paratransit. And so the requirement for them from the ADA is that they're supposed to, for people who are ADA eligible, they're supposed to provide that ride. So that means that in fact, for both El Cerrito and San Pablo and any place south of Westcat service area, we would be able to get a ride that way. And sometimes I think even people in Westcat can get a ride through East Bay Paratransit, but I'm not sure of the details. So people are able to get around is what it means.
I think that's definitely true, Janet, in West County, if they're qualified, ADA qualified.
Mhm.
So we find that we have a lot of people who fit in an age category or a limitation of their abilities, but they don't qualify for ADA. So it's a tangled web. And I appreciate those cities who are really making the effort to supplement where they can and get people where they need to go.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next comment?
Oh, yeah. I think so.
Lost.
Sorry.
Oh, there's a hand. So Dale?
Yes, thank you. Peter, do you get Major X funding?
I will actually talk, we do not, but I will talk about that in the next agenda item.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank
So
you.
Measure X is a county, a county measure. And so the county is the jurisdiction of the agency that decides where the Measure X funding goes, not CCTA.
Thank you.
So I believe that's all the hands. Is there anyone else who from the committee that wants to speak?
I would just like to address Peter on his presentation.
Could I ask who's speaking now?
Pello Smith.
Oh, Pello. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Okay. Peter, this is the clearest and most to the point explanation since I've been on the council that I've heard since I've been on the council as to where the funds are coming from and exactly how they're being distributed to each individual agency. And it's very clear. You made a very good presentation, and I would just like to put the request out there. I think that slide presentation would be good. I know it would be helpful for me to have a copy of that.
I will send it to everybody.
Thank you.
Or I will have Caitlin send it to everybody. How's that?
That's even better.
And thank you for the compliment, Pello. I confuse myself with it sometimes. It is very difficult. And it's only taken me 15 years at CCT to figure it out.
Oh, so I don't feel bad, just what, 4 years? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Caitlin. So are there any further comments, questions?
This is Jean. Again, I was wondering if we could put on there or for our next meeting to do some type of review of service area or have the service areas provide each provider give the council the area that they provide service to, because I feel like that's kind of the next step to just make sure that we are servicing every area that we think we are, that we say we are with the funding that we're doing. So I would like to put that forward.
How can we best do that, Peter?
It's easy other than West County. So, I mean,
that's so true.
I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean,
I suspect that's what she's interested in.
Yeah, the easy thing to do would just be to give the, in the case of the transit operators or service area, although there probably is areas within their service area that aren't served. I can reach out to I think Rashida, you probably have a service area designation for your ADA trips that are within the appropriate or whatever your policy is from a fixed route, which I'm sure isn't your entire service area for County Connection, but it's probably pretty close. But the cities become a little bit more complicated. And then how would we do it? Would we do it by census tract or transportation analysis zone or zip code, which probably wouldn't work without really kind of looking at how it's all broken down? It would be difficult, but we can do
Peter,
it. We can do
Peter,
it.
I just want to say that we are trying to collect that data right now. John Joya, Supervisor John Joya, asked specifically for that at our board meeting in October. We are reminding Richmond that we need this information. I already got something from Jean and from Bridget. So I feel like we're not that far away from having that information, but it is more complicated in the unincorporated areas. And we also are looking at data for pickups and drop-offs to see if not just those areas are designated, but they're also being served. So I don't know how soon we can get that, but you and I can talk.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. I think because we do know which census, what's it called? It's not the census tract, it's the next thing bigger, the census area, census, like El Sobrante is a census designated place. And we know that that is supposed to be all of, as far as I can tell, Richmond and West Cat have broken up the service area by those census designated places. So anything smaller than that wouldn't matter.
Well,
so all of El Sobrante is supposed to be served by our transit.
Peter,
Yes.
my son happens to live in El Sobrante, and I'm a little bit familiar with it from that. And part of it is in the city of Richmond, and part of it is in the unincorporated area.
Right. So I'm just talking about the unincorporated part. Yeah.
Than the usual area.
Well, if it's in the city of Richmond, then that's clearly in the Richmond service area. I'm just talking about the unincorporated portion at this point.
The unincorporated area is where my son lives, and so I'm pretty familiar with that one because I get rides there.
Yeah.
At least if you live in El Cerrito, to go from El Cerrito to the unincorporated area of El Sobrante, I'm quite familiar with the service. Now, if you started out in another jurisdiction, such as San Pablo or even Richmond, I'm not quite sure how it would work, but I do know how it would work from my area because I've been told, what it is. Are there other comments, questions on this item before we move on? We need to make sure we can get through the whole meeting.
Member Dowgelli has a brief comment.
Please, go ahead.
Well, it's just you had mentioned something about Kaiser, and this may not be appropriate, I'm not sure, but Kaiser Medicare Advantage offers a 50-mile range free rides to and from the facilities. You may wish to investigate that, even though it's not technically something under PCC's jurisdiction, but you had mentioned Kaiser. And I've been using, I can get from my house in Antioch all the way out to Walnut Creek, Kaiser. So maybe people who live in your area would be able to get to the nearest Kaiser using this. It's a free rides to the doctor, and it's through Kaiser Medicare Advantage.
Is that through the section C?
No, it's not. It's not related to anything that has to do with. It's directly through Kaiser Medicare Advantage, and it's a separate company. I've used it frequently over the last year.
And interesting to hear about that. I mean, I'm interesting to hear that because I'm not aware of any free service I get, and I do have Kaiser.
Yeah, what you do is you contact the Kaiser Medicare department.
Okay. It may be a thing you pay for extra for, There is.
No,
I
it's
think,
free. It's free. It's free. It's provided by Medicare. I mean,
But-
I know that you're only 39, Janet, but if
of course. Actually, Medicare isn't free either. So I get a bill for it every month.
right, but it's provided through that. It's no additional charge rather than free.
I don't know. Could you report back to us on it? Or should
Well,
I?
there's nothing to report. Does you need to, people who are eligible for Kaiser Medicare Advantage need to contact Kaiser Medicare Department, and they will arrange to have that service for you.
I might be able to add to that. If
Mhm.
if you're a member of Kaiser, you're almost certain to be automatically enrolled in Medicare Advantage. And what you're referring to, Janet, as paying extra for it, before COVID-19 and the pandemic, in order to be included in Medicare Advantage, there was a $20 upcharge per month, which they eliminated in 2020 because of the pandemic.
Thank you. I will make a phone call. Okay. Is there anyone else on this item before we move on? We're getting a little bit to the point we want to move on. Okay, not hearing anybody. Do we have any members of the public who want to speak, Caitlin?
No, we do not have any additional members of the public who would like to speak, and we do not have any written comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. Then with that, we'll move on to the next item after thanking Peter for that great report. I think we all appreciated it. So next we're moving on to item B, which is an update on the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan, or otherwise known as the ATSP. And we're going to be talking about the implementation of that. And Peter, are you going to be covering that?
Yeah, I'll cover it, and I'll make it fairly brief, Chair Abelson. So the Contra Costa Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan was adopted by the CCTA board in March of 2021, and the board wanted some immediate action in implementation. So they immediately formed a task force to continue the implementation process. There's 4 tasks, associated with the task force. One is to put together a separate agency, a permanent agency that would begin to really handle coordination of all of the services, not just the public services, but the private non-profit services as well, and make sure all those disparate services coordinated with each other, and then provided both technical assistance and funding and other stuff to help kind of fill the gaps and help with that coordination. So that work has started. That's going to be a little bit longer process because there's no preliminary work was done as far as how that agency would be formed or what kind of agency it could be. It could be another government agency. It could be a hybrid nonprofit government agency. It could be just a nonprofit. It could be an existing nonprofit. It could be a new nonprofit. It could be any sort of things. And the task force has just begun work at looking at those. The more exciting item is actually the implementation. It's kind of implementing the low-hanging fruit. And Dale referred to Measure X, which is a general sales tax measure that was passed by Contra Costa County voters. It's countywide. It's not only related to transportation. It can be used kind of at the discretion of the county. The county formed a committee, the Measure X advisory committee, to receive requests for funding and to consider those and prioritize them. And the county, county staff through help from CCTA and the Department of Conservation and my counterpart in lots of the paratransit stuff, John Cunningham, submitted a request for $1.4 million of that Measure J or Measure X. Now I'm talking about Measure J, Measure X funding, which was approved by the Board of Supervisors. So we're going to receive $1.4 million for the next certain number of years. It's kind of undefined, but it is an annual allocation to help implement the recommendations of the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan. The first kind of items that are on that list are four things. One is that coordinated entity and kind of getting the work towards that. The second thing is supporting a program that you're going to hear about in the next item from Rashida, the one-seat ride program, which is the pilot has been very successful. The third item is some type of a user side subsidy for low-income individuals who find the fares for services too high. And the fourth item is a referral service, continue or improving referral service, often referred to as one call, one click, where a person can find out about services, apply for services, and kind of understand the transportation landscape by making either one phone call or going to one website and getting all the information they need. Like I said, including hopefully at some point signing up for ADA services for a particular or any operator in the county. So those are the four items that we want to get started this year with the first round of the $1.4 million. And the next meeting of the task force is in February. They're going to meet every other month. And I know a lot of you are involved with the task force. And it's very exciting. It's very exciting to really start implementing some of these programs that came out of the study. So like I said, we're on a fast track. At our February meeting, we anticipate taking a funding package for the task force to bless. If they bless that in February, we'll take it to the authority CCTA board in March. We are concurrently getting into or signing a master agreement with the county in order to have those funds start to flow as soon as they get approved. So that's the good news. And I'll leave the report at that for now.
Okay. In what you just discussed, did you cover item C, the update on the one seat?
We're going to do that
right.
next. We're going to do that next.
It'll be next. Okay.
Yeah, Rashida will do
so
it.
Going back to item B, the update on the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan implementation, are there any comments or questions? Okay, and I assume that was at the committee that thought I was asking that question. So are there, not hearing any, are there any from the public? Is there any public?
At this time, there are no public comments for this item.
I'm not sure if I'm an official public person, Peter, or I'm not an official member.
No, you're public.
Thank you. I have a comment.
You're VIP public, Joanna.
Please go ahead, Joanna.
Or one of those people that just shows up at meetings that's annoying. So this is fantastic. Peter's excited. I'm excited. The four things, the coordinated entity, the one seat ride, these, the coordinated entity, as I see it, is the umbrella in which the one seat ride, the low income subsidy, and the referral service come under. And I think when it goes to be blessed, that will become more evident. I did not know, Peter, that there's the possibility of future allocations from Measure X, as in maybe not just 1 year, but like we can ask them again and they might say yes again.
The recommendation that was approved by the Board of Supervisors would be that this would be an annual allocation.
That's fabulous. That's like, I mean, we don't want to get dependent on anything, but until there's a new half-cent sales tax or something, we are. And then also my other comment was we've been doing travel training, and this is not the place to bring it up, but if there were a fifth item, and I missed the last meeting last week. I actually went on vacation, God forbid. And I guess travel training would be something I think that countywide would be really low hanging fruit. So that's my comment.
Okay, are there any other members of the public who have a comment? Okay, not hearing any, we'll close that item. And I'm trying to figure out, so we've finished the 1-seat ride?
No, that's where we
No,
are right now.
that's where we are. We talked about it in the last several items. So now we officially will talk about it. Peter?
Right. So I wanted you to hear from Rashida. Rashida is kind of the lead person with the operators in the county on this 1-seat ride pilot program. And she did present this to the task force when we were talking about, continued funding and kind of where it was at. And so I thought it was appropriate. And Rashida agreed to give the presentation here. And I think a little time has passed since that occurred. I don't know if she has any updated numbers or anything. But it seems like it's really solving the problem that we've heard for many, many years about having to make transfers from one agency to the other. And I will just, a lot of kudos go to Rashida for the hard work she did in putting this pilot together, and the other operators in what they've done, not only in the initial pilot period, but also extending the pilot period because of COVID. They felt it was necessary to run the program longer, but I'm sure Rashida will talk about that. So I introduce Rashida Kamara from County Connection Link.
Thank
Okay,
you very much, Peter. Happy to be here. First of all, I'd like to apologize for those of you who heard this presentation earlier today. It's going to sound a little bit repetitive, but there are just a handful of people here who have not heard it. And if there are questions that you wanted to ask the last go around that you didn't get a chance to, then you get a chance to answer it here. First of all, I'd like to say that teamwork makes the dream work. I did not do this by myself. It's been a problem that has affected all of us. And so as a result, frankly, majority of the transit agencies, especially in Contra Costa County, have come together to do this. So this is not just a county connection thing. It's the successful collaboration of the public transit agencies in the Contra Costa County. So as many of you know, transfer trips, you're going from one jurisdiction to the other jurisdiction. In the past, we used to have transfer points, what we used to call meet points. In other words, if you're traveling from Tri-Delta, maybe to Concord, Antioch to Concord, you'd meet at the North Concord BART station, and the two bus drivers will meet after an extensive reservation process. Depending on what's going on with that driver, there might be some wait times. You would have dealt with at least 2, maybe 3 agencies. There's some time to coordinate that. There's some days to coordinate that. When I say days to coordinate, each of the transit agencies have different policies when it comes to booking reservations for transfer trips. Some agencies say, can you give us a 2-day reservation period? Some say 5 days, some say 3 days. So if a passenger is going from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, they are at the mercy of the longest reservation period, depending on the agency that they're going to be coordinating with. We mentioned earlier about the driver meet points, sometimes BART stations, sometimes at a Safeway, and then the ripple effect on the schedule when things don't go as smoothly. Usually when you book regional transfer trips, you want the driver to be there at 10 o'clock. You want the other driver to be there at 10 o'clock. And normally there should be a smooth exchange of the passenger. Well, let's talk about pre-COVID, because we've been dealing with this problem for quite a number of years, at least the 20 years that I was worked in an operational setting. If the vehicle has about 4 or 5 people in there, one's going to dialysis, one's going to a birthday party, one's going to a cancer treatment, and there's a regional trip person on there, well, all 4 or 5 of those individuals will be at the mercy of the meet point and basically will be held hostage until the driver shows up to pick up the person who's going to be transferred. So there's a huge ripple effect of the other individuals that were waiting in the vehicle. Then there's passenger safety. Usually when that happens, and this is real life experience, passenger gets upset. You know what? That's ridiculous. Get me off this bus. I'd rather wait on my own. We have a sense of responsibility when it comes to this passenger. There's a reason why it's called a handoff. We want to make sure the person is handed off to the other driver. Well, when that happens, there are times when passengers want to get off the vehicle and it poses a safety situation. Not to mention just a really, the transit experience was not at its best. There was definitely not any satisfaction there. So before one seat, when we looked at our 18-19 numbers, we did about 14,000 transfer trips. And these 14,000 transfer trips were mostly trips that met up with Contra Costa County. No-shows was about 2%, cancellations about 20%, on-time performance was about 84%. I can tell you right now, not one of the participating agencies' performance standard when it comes to on-time performance is 84%. In fact, Counter Connection may have the lowest performance standard of 90%, but you definitely want your drivers to be more than 90% on time. 84% was abysmal. Dwell time, and that's just an average dwell time, 8 minutes. Excuse me. So we also have some partial numbers. By the way, when we talk about dwell time, we're talking about a driver basically just kind of hanging around and waiting for something to happen with a passenger on board or with a passenger not yet on board whilst we're waiting for the passenger to show up. Partial COVID, as you know, when COVID hit, services dropped about 50%. So instead of 14,000, we were more like at 8,000. No-shows went up 5%, cancellations went up to 21, and on-time performance, believe it or not, went up. It went up slightly because we weren't transporting that many people. Dwell time, of course, also went down because we weren't transporting that many people. It is important to say that even though on-time performance went up, a lot of people thought that the problem of transfer trip, because the numbers went up, on-time performance improved 92%, that transfer trips had gotten better. They hadn't gotten better. We were just dealing with less people, and we weren't transporting as many people in the vehicle. And number one, it was a lot easier for agencies to not wait at the meet time and just drive the passenger through the other jurisdiction to drop them off. They didn't have to hurry to get back to another passenger because of COVID, right? So there was a false sense of solving the problem. The problem was not solved. So COVID presented a unique opportunity. Obviously, ridership had gone down. The opportunity presented itself by way of contact tracing. As I was mentioning earlier, a passenger could use several vehicles, several drivers to get from point A to point B. Well, we all know what happened with COVID is easily spreadable. And so this provided an opportunity. So the agencies got together, the public agencies got together. We did a little bit of background work. We started pulling ourselves together, and we went to our boards, and our boards approved it. And as we were going back and forth on how we can make this work, there was only one thing that resonated with all of them. And they said, you know what, it's the right thing to do. Let's do it. So in order for us to streamline this process, we had to have interagency agreements. As you know, each of the agencies have their own scheduling softwares. They have their own jurisdictional maps. So we had to do some legwork. We had to take these maps. We had to upload these maps into our service area so that it can be identified as one seat. We had to do a little bit of work when it came to our policy updates. There was a lot of discussion regarding the fare structure. We certainly didn't want to put a fare structure in place where we solved the problem and yet made it cost prohibitive to actually use the service and take advantage of the solution. We also gave passengers who used the one-seat ride access to My Transit app. My Transit app is basically an app that you download on your phone, and you actually get notifications on your regional one-seat ride that lets you know that your driver is 5 minutes away. It also gave you notifications. We are able to put emergency notifications on here. You're also able to rate your trip as your trip is happening from 1 to 5, poor or great, and give a commendation. You're also able to cancel your trip. Right now, we're working on the ability to book trips. We haven't got there yet. But anybody from any agency who gets onto our database and books themselves a one-seat ride has access to use this app. We streamlined it again by 1-day advance booking. We wanted to make it as simple as a normal ADA reservations trip. So instead of the 2-day, the 5-day, the 7-day, you know what, just 1 day. Instead of the 1-hour cancellation policy, 3-hour cancellation policy, you own just the 1-hour cancellation policy. Instead of multiple phone numbers, multiple agencies, just call one number and you have a one-stop shop where we took care of everything for you. So what we did was that we eliminated the touch points and the wait times. Instead of dealing with potentially 4 or 6 reservationists, you only dealt with one. Instead of 4 or 6 drivers, you only dealt with 2 drivers, one going, one returning, maybe the same one. And the agencies shared the cost of the actual trip, the actual time the passenger was on the vehicle. And then of course, we chose a low-cost transit vendor. So for 12 months, November to November, we did about 6,600 trips. No-shows was 3%. Cancellations, if you remember, it was 21%. It went down to 5%. On-time performance went from 84% to 93%. And there was a 44% decrease in dwell times. There are still some ongoing challenges, even though we've solved quite a bit of problems in the 1 year. This is still a non-ADA mandated service. There is some unknown expense. Some of the numbers that I'm going to show you, it's important to note that it's void of overhead, staff time. I'm only going to be showing you raw numbers. There's potential deadhead costs that we have to take into consideration. And then of course, how about individuals who are not just traveling within Contra Costa County? What if individuals want to go to San Francisco and Stanford? How could we sustain something like that? How about ongoing funding? As we start to develop a program like that, other people might want a piece of the pie. Can we continue to keep a low-cost vendor? And then of course, COVID gave birth to this opportunity, but at the same time, low productivity. Before COVID, we could do all these shared ride opportunities. Well, with COVID, even though we're no longer doing one person per vehicle, just by the sheer volume of trips that we're not doing, we're doing 2, maybe maximum 3. So the low productivity provides its own challenges. So as I was mentioned, these are just pure costs. In that year, we spent a little over $82,000 that we shared. The reason why the word polygons are in here, they represent the service area. Basically, if a driver spent 30 minutes transporting a passenger from Concord to Antioch, we split the bill. If 15 of those minutes were spent in County Connection service area, that was our cost. If the other 15 minutes was spent in Tri-Delta service area, then we just billed Tri-Delta for that 15 minutes. What people have not seen is the deadhead cost that the driver actually has to drive back, possibly empty, to wherever his next trip may be. And these are costs that County Connection has basically eaten up. And more importantly, staff and overhead time is not included in this. So eventually it'll have to be included so we can figure out a way moving forward. The fare structure is very important to know. The passenger pays paratransit fare from the jurisdiction in which the trip originates. So if the trip originates in Tri-Delta service area, they will pay the $2.50 from Tri-Delta service area and come into Concord. If they're returning from Concord to Tri-Delta service area, then they'll pay the $5 paratransit fare returning from our service area into Tri-Delta service area. And this basically streamlined everything for the passenger. The passenger didn't have to think a whole lot about what was going on. When they made their reservation, they were told exactly what the fare was going to be. So here are those that are participating in it. County Connection, 48% of the trips belong to County Connection, 39% to Tri-Delta. WestCat has a little over 5%, and LAFTA has a little over 4%. Between the months of February and September, we did do some tester trips with East Bay Paratransit. That was a little under 1% of the total transfer trips that we were doing. But we're no longer doing tester trips with them. And after all that hard work, it basically boils down to this: improving the passenger's experience. We all believe that this transportation is just an extension of our life. You know, we weren't meant to remain at home. We were meant to go out and live. And when we're able to do this, there's so much that we've done to enhance independence, but also the quality of life for our passengers. So we do have a few quotes of individuals who have used both the traditional transfers and also have been part of the one-seat pilot. Somebody here mentions, I love to continue using this. The communication was a problem before between agencies. They have a condition where they have a severe lumbar pain and sciatica, and they can't afford to wait long times at the BART station. So the one-seat ride eliminates that meet point, and they're able to have an efficient trip from point A to point B. We have another passenger who claims that the trip cuts their entire travel time from 3 hours to 1 hour, depending on traffic. Another passenger says that their health is very frail, especially after dialysis treatment, and not using the traditional transfer means that they're able to take their medication and they have time to recover from the dialysis that they took. Another passenger says that this feels safe and secure, and it feels as if you're giving me my life back. That it's the next best thing as putting my own key into the ignition of my own car. And then, of course, another person talks about how well trained the drivers are and how on time they are. So some of our next steps, you know, the post-pandemic cost structure. A lot of the transit agencies are using CARE Act funds, and so they are able to really take advantage of, you know, paying for some of these things. And so we need to really think, you know, outside of the box to make sure that this program is definitely sustainable. The pilot, I have good news. All boards of the participating agencies have approved the extension of this, so it will be going through the end of this year. And one of the things that we want to do is that we want to work with the ATS implementation so that, you know, the public agencies, they've managed to, you know, kind of get this off the ground, build it, get a template going, but there's a huge unmet needs for persons with disabilities and seniors that are outside of the individual ADAs corridors. So what if a senior who's not qualified for ADA wants to, you know, travel from Antioch to Westcat for a maybe a non-medical trip? Maybe it's not to a Kaiser, so to speak. You know, how can this person take this one-seat ride? We're hoping to have more dialogue with the ATS to see how this unmet need can be taken care of. And what can we do to implement this type of transportation services throughout Contra Costa County? Decisions to be made, integrating East Bay Paratransit. As I said, we did a handful of tester trips, but it certainly does not represent the significant amount of transfer trips that happen into East Bay Paratransit. Expanding the service to include trips between other agencies. So not just those that connect with County Connection, which is what you're seeing right now, but maybe Westcat and East Bay and LAFTA, so that everybody can have access to this. And then of course, conversion to a permanent program. We're talking about this, we're talking about pilots. Nobody wants this presentation every year. They want to know that we have used this golden opportunity to build a program to offer a service that stands the test of time. When we left here, we left our mark, and we were able to give people one-seat rides where they didn't have to worry about whether or not it was going to go away, just like ADA is not going to go away. We're going to meet and take care of an unmet need. And then the other decisions to make, you know, will it end up being something that's a premium fare? Will it end up being something that's a rider's choice? You know, if a driver goes 17, 18, 20 miles to a location and a passenger habitually says, oh, I forgot to cancel. Oh, is that today that you guys showed up? Oh, my daughter decided to take me. We don't want them to get into the habit of having no-shows because, you know, it does cost to do this. So will there be fees for those types of behaviors? We don't know. These are definitely things that we need to look into. So having said all of that, I'll be more than happy to take questions.
Are there any questions from members of the committee?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Pello again. I don't have any questions. I just have some compliments to throw. Rashida, you and the committee that worked with you on this have done a fantastic job. And I understand that this is a beginning, but what a beginning it is. And just continue to think out of that box. That's what I've been talking about for the 4 or 5 years I've been on this council. We cannot continue to do the same thing over and over again. We don't know where the funding is going to come from, but we never will find out if we don't keep kicking that can up the road, not down the road, kicking it forward. Great job, Rashida.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other comments or questions?
Member Dowgelli would like to ask a question.
Please go ahead.
The one thing that I've noticed, because I've been in contact, I may need the service to go to a doctor in Lafayette, for example. And I think it's just wonderful what you've done. But what about the use of requirement that it has to be a cash fare as opposed to having some tickets available for it? Because I know, like, for example, Tri-Delta has a ticket that's worth $2.75. What's the current status of using tickets, or is it still cash only?
No, at first they were taking cash only, but these are some of the things that we've been talking about because it was easier just to do the cash, and that was because of the problem that we were encountering regarding the reimbursement. So we are working behind the scenes to try to streamline that aspect of it so that whatever mode of payment that the passenger has on hand will be accepted. And that's another reason why it's been extended again as a pilot, because there's still a handful of things that we need to tweak to make it easier for the passenger to be able to use the system.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Not hearing any. Are there any members of the public who want to speak? Not hearing any. I think we want to thank Rashida for her super presentation. And now we'll move on to the next item, which is operator updates on Omicron variant surge and its impact on service.
Yeah, so Janet, I just wanted to let you open the floor to the operators, give them an opportunity to talk about how Omicron has affected, especially this huge recent surge, affected service in their service areas, or any particular issues that they can share that might be helpful to the other operators.
Okay, great. Is there an operator that would like to start? Rashida, would you like to start?
Yes. So regarding our paratransit side, because we were using CARES Act, we did not actually lay off or furlough any of our drivers. So as a result, we've been keeping most of the drivers that started at the beginning of the pandemic. It's different on the fixed route side. On the fixed route side, we are experiencing quite a shortage of fixed route drivers. It seems as if every time we hire, between those that have retired during the pandemic, those that are, kind of taking some time to take some medical leave during the pandemic. So it's not just us, most companies are actually struggling. And then since the beginning of December, the Omicron has actually hit us. I think since December, maybe we have about 11 or 12 on the fixed route side. And I think 3 on the paratransit side that tested positive. Which happens to be the highest spike basically since the pandemic hit. And most of those that tested, I think all of them except for maybe 2 were vaccinated. But the good news is that we still continue to provide auxiliary services like Meals on Wheels, some services for the county in order to not only keep our drivers engaged in the community, but also to continue to provide important resources to the community when they can't go out and get it themselves.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if there's of the operators who are here. I do see Bridget's picture right now. Bridget, do you have a comment about El Cerrito?
Yeah, I was say El Cerrito is operating pretty much the same way that we've been operating through most of this. We've still doing single rider rides and still using our drivers to help with the meal delivery in the city. We are noticing a little bit of an increase in requests for rides as programming is coming back, which is nice, but we haven't had any positive COVID cases among our drivers. We haven't really had anything different as far as the COVID or the Omicron.
Okay. How about other operators who are here? Is Richmond here? San Pablo, right?
Yes, hello. My name is Maria. I'm from the Save San Pablo. So we were actually, the senior center had opened back in October, and we had an increase in ridership for our paratransit service. And we were doing actually really well. And unfortunately, this month we actually had to shut down again due to the increase of the Omicron variant. And so we decided as a city to shut down, and that has actually led to our service numbers to decrease. But we are still trying to provide as much service as we can, strictly sticking to essential service only, and as well still providing brown bag delivery for the senior food program. So we're just trying to do our best in the meantime, but we should be opening back up on the 31st of January, and hopefully we'll be up and running again to full capacity.
Okay, thank you. Kim, would you like to talk about?
Yeah, thank you. Really, it's business as usual over at East Bay Paratransit. The only difference was with the spike in the Omicron, we did halt in-person assessments for eligibility for a while. I don't have the exact date to when the in-person assessments will start back up. As I get that information, of course, I'll let you all know. But everything's kind of business as usual. On the fixed route side, kind of like Rashida said, with every other operator, we're having a driver shortage, so that causes us to not be able to bring the service back as quickly as we would have wanted to pre-pandemic levels. But, we're kind of monitoring that as well.
Okay, and did I miss an operator that's here? Okay, I think we're finished, except for we need to take public comment. Is there any public comment on this item?
There's no written public comment, although we do have members of the public here. If I don't see any raised hands at this time.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which takes us to reports. And the first report is the Service Review Advisory Committee. And we did have a meeting this month. I think you somewhat got a report on that just a minute ago from Kim, but the thing I wanted to mention is that we're testing out a different way of doing trips in terms of fare payment, and that would enable people, if I say this right, to use their Clipper card. Kim, you'll correct no. Would you like to take over the report? I'd love it if you did.
Okay. So East Bay Paratransit is developing a contactless payment app that will allow individuals to pay for their trips in advance of the actual trip start time. Folks will still have to make their reservations in the regular way, but they could pay for and monitor their trips via an app. It will be available for any smartphone, Android or iOS. When that becomes live, we're not sure. We were aiming for late February, so I'm hoping that we're still on track with that. But the moment that it becomes available, then any East Bay Paratransit registered user will be able to download the app, and then all of the information is there. We're currently developing fact sheets, information for the website. We're going to put signs on the buses, all of the usual marketing ways to get the marketing information out to people. But yeah, as soon as it becomes live, then we'll let you all know.
Now, one thing that other operators might be interested in knowing is, would they be able to use this system in some form or a variant of it that was theirs after you get all the bugs worked out?
They would have to develop their own app. So this is strictly for East Bay Paratransit, but it's, I mean, other agencies currently use contactless payment apps, so it's not foreign. It's just a lot of pre-work to, the testing, the getting all of the kinks worked out before it goes live. But yeah, I think any other operator that would want to do so could definitely develop their own app. Smartphone app.
What it does is it makes it a lot easier for the user, because they're not stuck in a situation where it's like, oh, I have a trip tomorrow and I don't have any tickets left and I don't have any cash either, which can be how it is now. This could be all, you just put more money on your card and you're ready to go the next day.
Let me throw one other thing out there. So you can use the contactless payment app with a credit card, debit card, gift card, Venmo, or PayPal. So lots of options.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Mary Bruns has a question.
Please, Mary.
So how do you find out how to set that up? Do you have any procedure that would give a starting point for an agency?
Yeah, so that'll be part of the information and fact sheets that we're developing or finalizing, I should say. And then there is a help number there if someone needs step-by-step instructions on how to set up a profile.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Dale. Kimberly, how would someone get a gift certificate?
So it would be a gift card. So let's say,
gift card. Okay.
Yeah. So if there's like a MasterCard or a Visa gift card that you can put any amount on it, you can use one of those as your, it would be set up the same way that you would set up your debit card.
So Dale, it would be like a gift. It would be like a Visa gift card that you get at Safeway or something.
Yeah.
That you would just give as a gift, but essentially from the electronic perspective, it's just treated like it's a Visa card.
Right.
But it's not a credit. It's amount you put on pre-advance. So it's not a specific gift card for East Bay Paratransit, for instance.
Thank you, Peter, for clarifying that.
On a single card, you could have, you could use it for AC Transit, for East Bay Paratransit, and you could also use it for County Connection, right? On the same card.
I don't quite understand what you mean by the same card. I mean, if you have any card you can use for whatever payment, but for East Bay Paratransit, if you were to attach a card, then your contactless payment app would just subtract from that card. But it's not sold to one app, if that makes sense.
So you could buy groceries with that same card.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
It's just money on the card.
It would just,
it's like
there's just a limit to the amount of money that's on the card. I mean, when you go to Safeway and you buy it and you go take it to the register and say, I'm going to put $250 on that. So wherever you use it, it's just going to subtract from that $250. So from, if you're using it, if you register that card in your East Bay Paratransit app, it's going to continue to draw from that card until there's no more money left. So if you're using it at Safeway or using it at other places too, that's also just drawing from that same amount of money. There's no credit situation. So you just got to watch. You got to keep an eye on the balance of that card, just like you would on any kind of gift card or any card.
So assuming that there's enough money on the card and you have a 2-agency trip, could you use the single card at the same, to do the 2-part trip, both segments?
Well, it sounds like in this case, it's just, well, if you're transferring to another agency that takes
assuming it's set up with both agencies.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You could register that card with both agencies and it would just subtract the fare at each one of them. So say, for instance, you take BART. Well, you can't really pay credit card on BART right now. So I don't know if there's an example.
Well,
there are some agencies around that are starting to take credit cards, but not all of them are there yet.
I was just thinking of some other agency that had it set up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any comments or questions?
This is Mary again. So usually there's a fee attached to these card uses. So you would be paying more rather than less?
There's no fee attached for paying for your trips through the contactless payment app.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
So in that regard, it's different than using a credit card at a store, huh? Because they have to pay a percentage because you used it.
My suspicion, and I don't know, Kim, if you can confirm this or if you don't know, my suspicion is East Bay Paratransit is covering that 3% for you.
There's no, I'm sorry.
Just like the store does.
So there's no fee to the user.
Yeah,
correct.
Okay.
No fee
To the writer, I should say.
Any other questions? Okay, we're getting a little behind. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate it. Okay.
I'm sorry, just really quickly. So your next SRAC meeting is going to be February 1st at 12:30, and it's on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will move on to the next report. We're running behind. And it's the Senior Mobility Action Council.
Hi, this is Mary. We had a meeting today, and Rashida gave her same presentation. It was helpful actually to hear it twice. So thank you, Rashida. You've done a wonderful job. Our last meeting was in October, and we had a presentation by the Contra Costa Active Transportation Plan. That's things like walking and biking. And we also had a presentation from Concord, who spoke about their Go-Go Grandparent transportation program.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on that item? Hearing none, we'll move on to correspondence and communications. Is that you, Peter?
Yeah, I just wanted to communicate, I think, one thing at this point, and that is the talk about virtual meetings. Our next meeting is in March, and we don't know yet if that next meeting will be virtual or not. The current law under the extension of the governor's, whatever it's called, is that every 30 days, I'm probably saying this wrong, and Terry Ann can correct me, but I think I'm close enough. Every 30 days, our board has to take action that there's still an emergency situation to allow us to continue to do virtual meetings. So we won't know until February if the March meeting we will still be under that ability to do those virtual meetings. I think our board is looking at a hybrid type meeting, if that's any way at that point. But we're hoping that at least March will continue to be virtual with this kind of surge in the variant that's going on right now, and it's expected to get a little worse over the next 2 weeks, specifically in the western states. So, but I just did want to bring that up, that we will keep you all informed as soon as we hear one way or the other what's going to happen in March, whether it be an in-person meeting or a hybrid meeting or a virtual meeting. We'll let you know.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And future agenda items? Is that you, Peter?
The only thing that we have is March will be bringing to you kind of the schedule for the fiscal year 2023 allocations under Measure J. And then in May, we will bring you the actual, projected payments to each of the operators so that they can go to our board in June for approval. I think in May, we will be doing the, I think it's time for re-election of the chair and vice chair. I think your term ends at the end of 2022, Janet and Pello. So, I mean, obviously you can get re-elected to those positions, but we'll do that election at the May meeting. And I think that's all I have right now. I think Jean talked about, coming back, whether it's at the next meeting or the meeting after. Joanna and I need to kind of get together and figure out how the best to present that, regarding the operating areas of each of the operators. So we'll certainly bring that back as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand up, Mary.
What is the date of the March meeting?
It'll be the third Monday.
The
So
21st.
we just meet in January on the fourth Monday because of Martin Luther King Day always falls on the third Monday. So it's March
21st, according to the agenda.
March 21st. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, then with that.
I'm so sorry. I had one more. This is Jean. Did we get a schedule for 2022 meetings?
Yeah, we will send that out to you. Our board approves that. Our board will approve it in February. So
okay,
we'll send that
great.
out to you.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So this concludes our meeting and we are adjourned at 3:50 today and to our next regular meeting, which is on March the 21st at 2:00. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.